Hello and welcome back to Brawler Bios. I'm your host Brian, also known as Malorian, and this here is a Warmachine podcast, but it's all about the 25-point level. Brawlmachine, that's the format made by the great folks there of Line of Sight, and what we do specifically here then is take a caster and really look at it at that Brawlmachine level. We're going to cover what its rules are, a potential list, and then we get into the fun part, which is giving grades on it, which of course, I say a grade for it. It's completely stupid. You get to tell me what it really should be. But hopefully I got pretty close there. Anyway, the one that we're going to be covering today is from Trollbloods, and it is going to be Madrak 3, also known as Madrak Great Chieftain. It was actually suggested to me by the people there at Brawlmachine. If you haven't gone and checked out their channel, it's probably something you should do. But yeah, it is a very interesting caster, a warlock I should be saying, and should be interesting to see what we come up with some grades for this warlock. Alright, so let's cover it here. So, Madrak Great Chieftain is a Trollblood Trollkin warlock. It has 6 fury, it's okay, sure, why not, 6 speed, strength 8, Mat 7, Rat 7, so some pretty good stats there for when you're wanting to be making attacks. Defense 14, Armor 17, so already some pretty good defensive stats as well. Command 10, and then Tough, has 18 boxes, and then 29 War Beast points. Now, it has 3 weapons on the card. The first one will be a Thrown Spear, which is just range 8, and then POW 14 magical weapon. Although this Thrown Spear does have reload, so you can spend a fury to make an extra attack, and because it's also thrown, any modifiers to the model strength will also apply here too. So it is low range, but you are playing in a faction that is paying the snipe tax basically, so it knows it could be going up to being range 12. I really kind of hate when they do this, but it's here. But it's also kind of nice too that this thing is already a POW 14 range weapon that you can easily buff. If you put something on here like Fury or whatever that adds to your strength, not only will it make you stab harder, it'll make you throw harder too. So always a nice thing to keep in mind. Alright, that same Thrown Spear can be used in combat, so you have a spear, which is a range 2 weapon, again magical, again P plus S 14, so same sort of idea there, and then no extra little rules when it comes to that, it's just a spear. The other thing that's going to be having on there too, though, is the Shield of Volar. I'm sure there's a more magical way to be saying that, but it is a 0.5 range weapon that's P plus S 12, magical again, so you got this magical shield, but here's the thing, it's a shield. It's giving you plus 2 armor. So when we were saying before that, like 14, 17, that's already pretty respectable, 14, 19 is great. That is a fantastic defensive spot to be for a caster. And actually, that Shield of Volar has a special rule as well, which is Beatback, which says here that immediately after a basic attack with this weapon is resolved during this model's combat action, the enemy model can be pushed 1 inch directly away from the attacking model. After the enemy model is pushed, the attacking model can advance up to 1 inch towards it. So this can do some different things. One, if you have something contesting your zone, maybe you just bash it with your shield and push it 1 inch out, and maybe you can be doing that. However, this can also make you threat a little bit further as well. You can make your charge attack with your shield, hit something, beat it back, and now you're 1 inch farther for whatever you really wanted to be stabbing with your spear. So, it's something that sounds weird, but there is some applications for it when it comes up. Alright, moving to the back of the card, the first thing we're going to be seeing on here is Field Marshal Shield Guard. So War Beasts in this model's battle group gain Shield Guard. So this is a really nice Field Marshal to have. A lot of times you're wondering if you should be spending the points on something like a Shield Guard just in case there's an Iris 1 or some strong weapon you need to be worrying about. So having this, so this whatever War Beast you take have Shield Guard, fantastic. You also have Protective Aura 8. So what this says here is this model can spend 1 Fury point to use Protective Aura at any time during its activation. When it does, friendly faction models gain +2 arm while within 8 inches of this model, +1 inch for each Fury point on this model. Protective Aura lasts for 1 round. So what this really is kind of like a duplicate version of the stone, and it's really great to have. I mean, normally down at 25 points, oh boy, I mean, like, do I want to be spending the points on the stone? I'm not sure. And when you're running Madrak Great Chieftain, well, no, you can just be doing Protective Aura. Now, I say that, but you do have to also keep in mind the cost to this. Now, the first cost to Protective Aura on Madrak 3 is, much like the stone, you have to be spending a Fury to activate it. So it's not like a free thing that's going on all the time. The other thing to keep in mind too is that this has a range that's going to be determined by how much Fury you have. Now, whereas with the stone, you can normally throw on a lot of Fury on there, and I mean, it's not going to use that Fury except for using this Protective Aura. Well, obviously this is your Warlock. You have other things you want to be doing with your Fury, so you need to keep in mind that every time you do these things, it's going to be reducing the range of your actual aura. Now again, that said, that aura is already 8 inches, and at 25 points specifically, that's likely actually going to cover all of your army. Again, if you do want to be spacing out a little bit more, it's something you're definitely going to have to be keeping in mind. But it's just, you know, this is something where it's not a free thing. You have to realize if you want to be doing any spells, you know, doing anything else, you know, popping the 1 to actually do this, it is going to be reducing the range. Finally, the last thing here is, of course, if you ever do use the actual Krill Stone, you usually have those UAs that can be having additional effects going on there as well, whereas this will not have those effects. So, you know, this is something that I maybe spent a little bit more time talking about than I really needed to, but I feel it's something that can be easily overlooked when you're trying to assess this rule being on the Warlock. Now, the next rule that's on here is Righteous Vengeance. And what this says is if 1 or more friendly faction warrior models were destroyed or removed from play by enemy attacks while within 5 inches of this model during the last round, during your maintenance phase, this model can advance up to 3 inches and make 1 basic melee attack. So this is another kind of threat extender. So just like how we kind of said the shield, you can charge in, bash something, get even further. Well, if you get an extra 3-inch move, that's fantastic. I mean, that also could be the thing where that thrown spear doesn't seem like it threats all that far, but if you're getting that extra 3-inch move, you know, maybe you don't need to do snipe. Maybe you can just get it in for that. So it's not always something that's going to be coming into effect, especially that attack, right? Because normally your Warlock is not going to be standing in the very front, so maybe they jammed you and attacked you and you get to go up there and make a free attack, whatever. I mean, it's just a nice thing to have on the card, but it also means that you are, again, dealing with this tight formation. You need this tight formation so you can be keeping Protective Aura on everything, and you want all your warrior models to be kind of within 5 inches of Madrak as well, if you really want to be threatening that Righteous Vengeance. So we're already kind of seeing that this kind of caster wants to be having kind of like a phalanx position, formation rather, where everything is together in a small little bubble. Now, just like you had the Field Marshal Shield Guard, this model has Shield Guard as well, and I find that hilarious, right? Normally, you're taking Shield Guards, and I guess I should actually be defining what Shield Guard is, just to make sure we all know. Once per round, when a friendly model is directly hit by a non-spray ranged attack during your opponent's turn while within 3 inches of this model, you can choose to have this model directly hit instead. This model is automatically hit and suffers all damage and effects. This model cannot use Shield Guard while it is incorporeal, knocked down, or stationary, and then the Shield Guard special rule can trigger only once per attack roll. Now, like I was trying to say, normally you're trying to protect your Warlock, and in this case, your Warlock is actually protecting others. So, kind of funny where you're like, oh, you want to attack a trooper? No, you're going to be hitting my most important model. Now, that being said, this is an armor 19 model, right? So that is fantastic. Now, here's another thing, is that we said it was armor 19 for that shield guard. Well, this is protective aura as well. So it's going to be within its own range of itself. So against that shot, it's not armor 17 like you see at the top, it's armor 21. So you can typically shield guard these things and be extremely safe. Maybe they'll get a couple of points in there, but hey, especially in Brawlmachine, protecting a solo, protecting, that infantry model might be exactly what you want. Although, as we kind of talked about there, it also has righteous vengeance. So sometimes you'll be left in these cases where they're shooting at one of your warrior models and you're judging them. It's like, what is your life worth? Do I want to save you? Because I can. I got shield guard. Or do I want to let you die so I can get a free move and a free attack? So it's always kind of funny whenever that comes up. Otherwise, that's really it for special rules that's going to be here on the card. So let's go now over to the next spot, which is going to be the actual spells. So this first spell on here is a great one, and it is Battle Lust. Battle Lust is a cost 3 spell, range 6, and it says target friendly faction warrior model / unit gains an additional die on melee damage rolls. Battle Lust lasts for 1 turn. So this is just fantastic, right? This is just Weapon Master that you put on any warrior model that you want, and unit as well, right? So if you have a unit that's going to be doing tons and tons of damage, well, great. Let's just make it even stronger. And again, this is going to be an additional die. So if they were already Weapon Masters and getting an additional die, this will just be now 2 additional die. So it's just always, no matter what the situation is, adding more damage on there. Now, do remember as well that Madrak Great Chieftain is also a warrior model. So that POW 14, which was already okay, well, why not just make that a Weapon Master, get an additional die, and now it's doing even more work. Again, something that you have to be planning before, because you probably don't want to be casting this cost 3 spell on the turn that you're charging in and really losing 3 attacks. But if you're able to just go and, upkeep this, that's going to be fantastic. All right, the next spell that's on the card is Defender's Ward. Another great spell, but also another cost 3 spell. We're going to kind of see that there's going to be some real choices to be made here when it comes to using your Fury. Now, Defender's Ward is, like I said, a cost 3, range 6 upkeep spell, and it says target friendly faction model unit, again, we're looking at these units, gains +2 defense and armor, and models are not affected while out of formation. So this is just, again, adding on another layer, but now it's something where it's going to be going on and making it not hit harder, but making it so that's harder to hit and have a higher armor. This is fantastic. And the nice thing here too is that because one is an upkeep and the other is not, you can do both in the same unit, right? You can put this Defender's Ward on a unit, upkeep it, and then go ahead and cast Battle Lust onto that unit there, and off it can go and do lots of damage as well. We are already seeing, like I said though, if you were to cast both Defender's Ward and Battle Lust in the same turn, that is all your Fury. So, of course you could be upkeeping Defender's Ward, but as we're going to be talking about at the end here, there's going to be real choices when it comes to your Fury on Madrak. The next spell on here is going to be Rebuke. Rebuke is a cost 2, range 10 upkeep spell, and it says target model unit cannot give orders, receive orders, or make power attacks or special attacks. Now, this can be very situational, but when it comes up, it can be massive. Let's say you're up against some cav and they're wanting to charge in and do impact attacks and all these things. Well, you just rebuke them and now they can't get that. Sure, they're probably fast enough because they're cav that they can probably just walk up and hit you, but they're not getting 3 dice to try and hit you. They're not going to get the impact attacks. They're not going to be getting the additional damage. It just really shuts them down. Additionally, you can be doing this to any other units as well, which really just takes away 3 inches of threat from them. So you're going to be seeing here that there's nothing really on the card that makes you threat further, but the way that you can be dealing with your threat is reducing the threat of your opponent. So if you rebuke them, maybe now you do threat further than they do and you're getting the alpha. Now, in 75 points, this wouldn't be meaning as much because you can only rebuke so many things, and if you go up there to do a rebuke without an arc node, you're probably in danger. But again, we're talking about at 25 points where they likely only have one unit, and so this is a great thing to put out there. Also, don't forget the idea that you also have the power attacks and special attacks being dealt with this as well. So if you're worried about something coming in and doing a thresher or something like that, this is another way that you can be shutting down those things. So not something you're going to be using every single game, definitely not every single turn, but something to really keep in mind for when it's going to be setting up a key play. Finally, the last spell that's going to be on here is going to be Spell Piercer. This is a cost 2 range self spell that says while in the spellcaster's control range, the weapons of friendly faction models / units gain blessed and damage type magic. It lasts for 1 turn. So what Bless does, of course, is ignores any of the defensive, defense or armor buffs coming from spells, and then magical weapons lets you get through incorporeal. So this is just a great way to answer any tech that your opponent might have. You know, if they had their own Defender's Ward, well, they're not getting +2 defense and armor when you cast this Spell Piercer because of Blessed. You're just ignoring all that stuff. So again, this might be a situational thing. You know, if your opponent doesn't really have any spells, or if the spells they're having is really offense and not defense, this is not going to come up, but it's a great kind of ace to be having up your sleeve so that whenever this situation does come up, okay, this is a way I can be getting around with that. So those are all the spells that are on the card. Of course, because this is Hordes, you could also be casting whatever animuses you have from your battle group, so there's always that there too. But like I was already mentioning, you can kind of see where you're already a little bit Fury strapped. So as an example here, if you went and upkept Defender's Ward, cast Battle Lust, and also cast Spell Piercer, that is everything. That is all of the fury that you have. And remember, that's just on the spells. We weren't talking about yet about protective aura. So if you also want to be having a fury left for a protective aura, well, then you need to be having one left for it. And how big of an aura do you need? Again, if you want that aura to be going more than 8 inches, you need to be camping more and having more on there so it goes out further. And on top of that, if you want to be camping just because, you know, camping keeps you alive, that's another thing you need to be keeping in mind for Madrak. So when it comes to your spells and what fury you're going to be using, you're really going to be feeling like that 6th fury just doesn't go that far. And you really have to kind of decide what your plan is going to be for that turn and be using your fury wisely, because it can be very easy to be like, oh, I'm going to do this and this and this. I want to be casting this animus, and then realize like, ooh, this does not go very far, and maybe you had planned to be popping protective aura and now you can't. And I would say that if you actually really need protective aura, maybe pop it first, just to make sure that if you get too greedy in your spells, that you actually have it out there and it's not too late. So those are all the spells. Let's now go on to the feat. The feat is going to be Rallying Cry, and what it says is while in Madrak's control range, friendly faction warrior models cannot become knocked down. When a friendly faction warrior model makes a tough roll of 4, 5, or 6 while in Madrak's control range, remove 1 damage point from that model. After removing this damage, the affected model can advance up to 3 inches unless it was disabled while advancing. The affected model cannot be targeted by free strikes during this movement, and this feat lasts 1 round. So this is first doing a big thing for infantry. What it's doing for infantry is just keeping them alive. This is trolls. That means pretty much everything is tough. And that means that if you're tough and can't be knocked down, that is mitigating one of the biggest negatives for tough, which is that, well, if I tough and be like, haha, I stayed alive, well, now I'm knocked down, I'm going to be automatically hit, and if I'm already knocked down, I can't tough again. But in this feat, I can't be knocked down, meaning that you can get into those loops where like, hey, I just tough over and over and over again, and you can't kill me. On top of that, those tough rolls are going to be even more likely because instead of just the toughs happening on a 5 or a 6, now it's on a 4 as well. Doesn't sound like a big deal, but it makes it, 50% more effective really when you look at the numbers. As well, on top of this, you get that advance. So if you were ever thinking like, okay, if they charge me, I might tough, and then that might save me, and now you're saying, well, I won't be knocked down, so I can tough again. Oh, on top of that, I'm toughing on a 4, 5, a 6. Well, the other thing too is that you also get to make that 3-inch move, meaning that you can probably just move out of their range, right? Unless you're up against something that has range 3 or 4 weapons, you can make that move and just be completely out of its range. And not only that, possibly you could be using this 3-inch move to be moving past it. So imagine a situation where they come in, charge you, they hit you, they basically kill you, but you tough. All right, well, I'm not knocked down, and now I get to move 3 inches, and I'm going to move behind you, meaning that not only can you not be making attacks against me, but now on my turn, I can just stab you in the back and make it easier to kill you, or maybe that's now freeing me up to be charging something else. As well, maybe there's some other shenanigans where they thought, okay, I'm just going to kill this model, and I'm going to charge this heavy into that heavy, and now not only do they not kill this warrior model, but you could be moving yourself to be blocking other charges. This can be massive over what they're trying to do. Think of something like a cavalry charge, right? The first cavalry come in, it does its impact hits, you tough it. Okay, now I'm going to be moving over here and blocking the next cav model that was supposed to be coming in, and just really messing with that kind of like order of activations for your opponent. So again, this is going to be really meaning that you're wanting to be having units in this type of list in solos, but it's something that you definitely want to be keeping in mind because it's not a do nothing feat. A no knockdown super tough movement feat is very interesting, and even though it could do nothing for you, right? If you roll a 1, 2, or 3, well, you're just dead. So doesn't matter if you're not knocked down, you're dead. The tough thing doesn't matter, the move doesn't matter, but just that threat of it alone makes your opponents do extra cautious things that makes their turn less effective as well. So all that together, a very interesting feat. All right, let's now go and talk about a list. We talked about where you need to have something that's dealing with units, and so you might actually want to go with more than one unit and whatever you want to be dealing with. But to me, the number one unit that you always want to be dealing with is champions, because they're just fantastic. So for starters, where I'm going to be going though is going to be Storm of the North. Now, if you're Brawlmachine out there, you're probably thinking like, whoa, that's not the list I sent you. Well, the list that Brawlmachine sent me is one that super skews against range attacks. It makes it so that you're getting like plus ridiculous armor against range attacks, and it's like don't even bother shooting. Well, to me, I don't feel this is really needed. And the reason why I feel that is that, one, you're automatically going to be having the protective aura in there, which is going to be giving you extra armor. But on top of that, remember that you have Shield Guard in here. And so because you have Field Marshal Shield Guard, all the battle group is going to be having it, you can already very much mitigate the range attack, and I'd rather actually have enough pieces in here to be going in and doing more work. To me, that's the biggest thing in Brawlmachine. You can always put in a lot of support pieces that can skew things very far one way, but it always seems to come down that if you want to be winning games consistently, you need to be having models that do work, and so that's why I'm actually going to be going for Storm of the North. As far as like the other advantages you're getting from this, sure, you're going to be getting immunity to cold, why not? It also means that you can be upkeeping your spells on your Northkin units without spending Fury. That's going to be massive for Madrak, where we already said we're going to be strapped for our Fury. And as well, you get a free, 2 4-inch Snowdrift that you get to put out there, which might be helping you as well. So that could also be pretty nice, getting out there, getting some concealment. So I kind of feel that you can be being defensive against shooting without going all in. Now, like I mentioned, I'm going to be going with the Trollkin Champions. They're already a unit that can do a lot of work. They have 2 P+S12 weapons. They're Weapon Master. Again, like I said, if you're charging in and you put on Battle Lust, you're going to get 2 dice normally, 3 because you charged, 4 because you're Weapon Master, 5 dice damage because you have Battle Lust on there. And that's 2 attacks with each model, so they can just do lots of work. Meanwhile, they also like your whole defensive ward because they're 12 18s, but they also have defensive line so that if they're base to base, that they get +2 defense. So they're going to be going from 12 16s to 14 16s to 16 16s, and then Protective Aura is also going to make those 16 18s. So this is a unit that you can be putting in the front and they can shrug off a lot and then dish back a whole bunch in return. Meanwhile, the battle group that I decided to be taking with Madrak, I think this is kind of the more common one I saw out there, is going to be a Mauler and a Bomber. The Mauler is great because you have Rage. As we talked about, this is something that adds +3 strength, and for Madrak, that's going to be adding damage to the stabby and the throwy, so always great to be having. The Bomber is something that can be throwing out there and like having a range unit that can go and be dealing with solos and getting some additional damage. Always really nice to be having. Plus, this is where you get that Far Strike, basically snipe, so that you get the +4 range. So Madrak wants that. Of course, the Bomber wants it as well. Going past this, the free thing I decided to take on here is going to be Valka Curseborn. So there's not a lot of really great free options you can take, but this is going to be a countercharge unit that also has Retaliatory Strike, also has Righteous Vengeance, and can be, also having a Weapon Master 2 attacks, and just really doing a lot of work. So this is something that, again, you want to work model, and if you have anything now coming into your group there, your champions, you can now say like, okay, well, if you want to do that, I'm going to be countercharging you, and that's going to be a real big deal. Talking about that, I also decided to be taking with that Scaldy Bonehammer. So Scaldy is a very cheap addition now to be throwing in there, only 3 points, and this is going to be giving you practice maneuvers, which is pretty fantastic. It's also going to be having on there the tactics for overtake, so when models in this unit destroy 1 or more enemy models with a basic melee attack during its combat action, it gets to immediately advance 1 inch. So that is a great thing for something that's going to be having, multiple attacks. It really helps you hit and move and hit and move. Or even another way to deal with this as well is that, remember, you have defensive line, so you might charge and be no longer in base to base, and this lets you kind of correct that, where that after your attack, after you destroy something, you can be moving that inch and getting back to base so that you're all defensive for the other side. The last thing I threw in here is a model I just love, and that's going to be Bumbles. So Bumbles is a real beast of a bear. It has countercharge, and it also has, with that, pitch. So if you were already thinking that Valka is saying like, all right, well, you can come into my, defense 16, armor 18 brick and try and do work, but I'm going to countercharge you and hurt you probably pretty bad. Well, Bumbles can come in, countercharge, and then as long as you hit, you throw that model D6 inches directly away. So yeah, are you going to be coming in here with, say, like a heavy? Well, get out of here. I'm going to shut this all down and just throw you away. You can also ambush with Bumbles if you want as well. So I mean, like, depending on the situation, you might do this, but this just really sets you up for that tight phalanx where you have the champions in the front. You are now threatening with the countercharge, with Bumbles, with Valka. Meanwhile, while in this phalanx, you are shooting out there with Madrak, shooting out with the Bomber, and then whenever something decides that they are going to come in, oh boy, you're going to mess them up. Or on the other side, you might rebuke them so that you're getting the charge. But then either way, before you know you're going to be taking your first big hit, whether you got the alpha or they're coming in for the alpha, you pop that feat. Everything in here has tough. Of course, not your battle group, but that means that all these things are being able to avoid danger. I mean, just think of Bumbles. Sometimes they might try and bait in a counter charge. You're like, oh, well, do you want to go after this warrior model? Yeah, sure. Why not? Go after it. And then if they actually go and now dedicate something to Bumbles, well, there's a 50% chance that Bumbles is just going to be not knocked down and just move away and ready to be doing a lot of damage next turn. So definitely something to be keeping in mind and doing a lot of work. However, do keep in mind that when you are doing this in your games, that scenario could be a problem. If you are playing the tight phalanx, that means that wide scenarios are a real problem. And that might be the time where, okay, this is a really live scenario. Bumbles, I'm going to need you to ambush in this one. So that might be a good way to do it. Plus, even if it's not a live scenario, ambushing Bumbles is going to be forcing your opponent to be keeping things more together in the center, and that's exactly what your phalanx wants to see. All right, my phalanx versus your phalanx, let's do this. So that's going to be it for what I have as a possible list. Now let's go in here and actually do some grades, the part that everybody loves. And the first thing we're going to be looking in here is a grade for answers. So if Madrak is going up against something and there's a big skew, what is on the card that can actually be on there to deal with it? And I think the first big thing that's on here is going to be that Battle Lust. If you see something that has a whole bunch of armor, well, let's add in some Battle Lust and we can go in there and crack it. It's really adding 3.5 damage on average to your attacks, and that's pretty good. So that's a great answer there. The other thing that you have there for answers is going to be Rebuke. If you have something that threatens you very far, well, Rebuke can kind of help mitigate that, especially if they're wanting to do like slams and stuff like that. Finally, you have Spell Piercer. So if they have a whole bunch of incorporeal and like, oh, I hope you have an answer. Yeah, I do. I can give everything magical attacks. Or if they have some very good defensive tech, you have that Blessed again from Spell Piercer. So you have these things on the card to be answering all these different things. I actually really, really like it. They're all not super, dominant in the way that they answer them, but there's just answers to kind of all the normal things you might be seeing out there. Even the idea for like, well, what do we have as an answer to shooting? Well, we have our protective aura and we have shield guard. So there's just a lot of things on here. So to me, when it comes to answers, I'm almost wondering if I should put this as like a B or an A. And as I try and think of this now, you know what? Because we're so encompassing and having a solid answer to everything on here, I'm going to give this an A-. It could be stronger. I'm not going to give it a full A, but I think an A- is a pretty great thing to be giving Madrak as far as having answers. Now, what about questions? What about the ability to say like, look, I'm going to pose this big, huge question, and if you can't deal with it, you're in trouble. And I think what it really is asking here as a question is if you can deal with the phalanx. I'm going to be having this tight formation. My forward unit, whatever it's going to be, is going to be having +2 defense, +2 armor, +4 armor when we're factoring in the protective aura. And then I have shield guard to be protecting it as well. Can you deal with this as well with the feet as well, right? If you're coming in, I just have everything around this infantry that's really going to keep it alive. Now, the problem with this sort of question is that sometimes the answer doesn't need to be an answer. Maybe they're just going to answer it by doing nothing and just avoiding you for a turn. Like you pop your feet and you're like, okay, I'm just going to stay away from you. That might be an option. Or the other counter to tight phalanxes is just to kind of like run in there and engage you. If I go in there and just try and like block you down, well, what that really does is limits your movement to the point that maybe I can really get ahead on scenario. So that's where this list can really suffer. And so even though it asks a question, I don't think it's a question that's an extremely powerful one. I mean, maybe you can be really aggressive. You really want to be probably going first with this and getting up the board. Again, you're not in any way that you're getting +1 or rerolls. So, I mean, if your opponent runs up first, use up the phalanx, and then they just kind of like run up and engage you, you can be in a lot of trouble. So, to me, as far as questions, I'm going to put this one as a C. I think I'm going to even put it lower. I'm going to put this one as a C- because it's just not a really good question whatsoever. All right, let's talk about the personnel output, and it's actually not too bad, right? You have your throwing spear, which can be fairly strong. You can be throwing it pretty, far if you have those things in there. Again, normally for this, we don't incorporate what's actually in the army, but you have to kind of think about when it comes to animuses, you get 2 throws, even with a regular POW 14 spear, that's already going to be doing some work. Having the P+S 14, not the strongest thing, but it's something. And again, you could be putting on Battle Lust onto yourself, so you could be making that even stronger. So it's not the worst thing that you see out there. There's definitely some real threat out there. And if you need to be finishing off a Warjack, you can probably cripple it by throwing a couple of spears into it. And if you need to charge in and finish it off, you can probably get the work done if it's a little bit of a weaker of a jack. So I'm going to be putting this as a B for personal output. All right, let's talk about for new players. If I have a new player come to me and say, Malorian, I'm going to be jumping into Brawlmachine, and my first caster, my first warlock I'm going to be using is going to be Madrak 3. Do I think that's a good thing? I'm kind of on the fence on this one. In part, it's nice because there's a lot of things on here that helps you save points, right? You don't need to get shield guards. You don't need to worry about a stone because all these things are in here. But you have to kind of have the knowledge to know how a troll list should normally work. And you might be a person that looks at this and gets fooled by all the things that are on the card, thinking you can do them all, and then as you get into the game being like, oh dang, I'm doing this, and now because I used all this fury, I either can't do my whole protective aura, or it's not going out as far as I need, or I'm not camping enough, so I'm getting myself killed, or I'm just not setting up my phalanx properly, or I lean into phalanx too much and I'm just losing on scenario all the time. So I actually don't think this is one that a new player is really going to be enjoying that much. So I'm actually going to be putting this one down. Oh, how far down? I'm going to put this down as a D. Actually, I think this is one that I think new players should be staying away from. Learn with a different troll caster if that's the faction you're going with. And then once you kind of get the idea of how things are supposed to be flowing and, fury management and all that stuff, then you might want to jump onto the Great Chieftain here. Now, what about the last one here? What's the grade for an experienced player? If somebody comes in and being like, you know what, Malorian, I want to go into a tournament. My plan is to take it down. I'm going to win it, and I'm going to be bringing Madrak, the Great Chieftain. Do I think that's a good idea? Well, then all of a sudden, I think that an experienced player can really be taking advantage of everything's on the card. They can be building a very powerful phalanx. They can know that they have all these answers in their list and on Madrak's card, so that no matter what they come up against, they're not going to be like, oh, well, paper, rock, scissors, I lose this one. I always have a game into everything. And of course, that type of player is also going to be having a plan for a scenario. So whether it's an ambushing bumbles or something else, they're going to make sure that they are not going to be just losing on scenario while they're making their phalanx. So in that case, I think it's a pretty solid B. I think that it's not an A. It's not something where it's going to be dominant and crushing everything, but I think it's a solid choice that gives you a good chance at winning an event. So there you have it. That is Madrak, the Great Chieftain. Hey, if you agree with me, fantastic. If you don't, let me know. I always love having that feedback. Plus, if you want to be having a say in what I'm going to be reviewing next time, I do this every 2 weeks. So let me know. Let me know what you want me to talking about, and I'll be happy to jump onto it. So there you go. That is going to be Madrak, Great Chieftain. We'll catch you later. Bye.